I improved by 19 minutes over the marathon in 2 years, and today I'm going to talk you through the mistakes that held me back in my first marathon and how I plan to improve moving forward. I've been running pretty much my whole life, so I've had time to make every mistake that you could think of. This is especially true when it comes to my approach to the marathon. So I'm going to take you through a short history of my marathon career, talk you through the main mistakes that I feel like I've made. I'll go more in depth on the training that got me to run 2:18 before finishing up with how I plan to keep progressing at the distance. So, the year is 2021 and life is good again. Races are starting back up. The Commonwealth Games are on the horizon. So I'm looking at these Commonwealth Games standards and I'm not seeing any times that I can get close to in the distances that I've ran. But I look down a little further and there's a time there that really catches my attention and feels like it just might be achievable. 2:15:12 for the marathon. This all happened only about 4 months before the London Marathon. I was able to get myself a championship entry because I'd ran sub 72:30 and a half. The perks to having this are that your entry's guaranteed and you get to start just behind the elites. So this debut was not part of a long-term plan. This was very much decided at the last minute, very short-term goal orientated, but I was ready to commit for the next few months and that's what I did. Going into London in 2021, I had the kind of confidence that you only have for your first marathon. I hadn't done anything in training that would suggest that I could run 2:15, but I'd done the best training in my life up to that point, and I really believed on that start line that I could get it done. Obviously, I didn't run 2:15 in my first marathon. I got cramp at 12 miles and had to stop to stretch my calves at the side of the road 10 times in the last 10 miles. I stopped for a chat with my parents about 20 miles. They gave me some jelly babies and told me to drop out, but I'd never dropped out of a race at this point in my running career, and I definitely didn't plan on starting at the London Marathon. So not a great result in the end. 2:37, 22 minutes outside my target. I don't really have a lot of photos and videos from this day, but I found this meme on Instagram when I was filming this video and it sums the race up perfectly. Cramp and result aside, this was one of the best days that I've ever had in my running. The crowds at London are just crazy and I got to run about a mile with Shalane Flanagan. So with this extreme mix of highs and lows, you won't be surprised to hear that I retired from running immediately after this race. 10 days later, I was back running and targeting some shorter distances. 3 months after the marathon, I was already running 3Ks. A 3K for me is just over an 8-minute race. So a big step down from the marathon, which took over 2.5 hours. And actually they were going pretty well. I ended up running my 3K and my 5K PB all within a year of my first marathon. And these PBs still stand just now. So I was obviously really fit. The training for that marathon got me in really good shape for the shorter distances, but it just didn't get me in good enough shape for the marathon. At the end of 2022, I picked up my biggest injury to date, which was a glute med tendon injury. Couldn't run for about 2 months, maybe even more than that, from December to February. Got back into running, tried some shorter distances again, was running 5Ks on the track, and then got sick in the middle of the summer. So what did I decide to do? Decided to enter another marathon. Valencia Marathon 2023, I had trained harder, I'd ran a lot more miles, I'd learned so many lessons from the first marathon, and I got cramp at 12 miles. Fortunately, this time around I was able to manage the cramps and keep them at bay until around 20 miles, at which point I really had to alter my form and I was kind of running like a race walker, not lifting my legs very high, just moving as quickly as possible without getting much lift off the ground. This continues from 20 miles until about 24, when actually everything started to feel a bit better and I was able to finish strong. So although I got cramp in this marathon, I managed to improve by 19 minutes to 2:18. By this point, I had completed 2 marathon blocks. I had trained really hard, had a lot of miles behind me, so I went into 2024 feeling confident. I got myself an elite place at London because I'd ran sub 2:20 at Valencia. An elite entry comes with a lot more perks than a championship entry. The first thing is that your entry's free. You also get a bus to the start line, which has about a kilometre long warm-up area, area that only the elites can use, and also you get access to the elite drinks tables, which are every 5k, and you can put whatever drink you want on there. So I trained hard again for the 4 months between Valencia and London. Training went amazing. I had the perfect build up. Every session went well. Every run felt good. I trained in Kenya for a month and I got cramp before halfway again. This cramp at London 2024 was not as manageable as the Valencia cramp, so I had to really slow down from about halfway to about 19 miles. Really just not able to move at a pace that was close to what my goal pace was. Anytime I tried to speed up, I would get cramp and have to slow down. I still ran for this whole time, but just wasn't able to go at the speed that I wanted to for about 6 or 7 miles. I actually looked so bad at 17 miles that the van that's only supposed to pick up elites when they drop out slowed down to ask me if I wanted to get in. So that tells you a lot about how bad I looked at this point, but I didn't get in for some reason. Well, the reason was that I wanted to tell my family that I had to drop out, but my family didn't actually make it to where they were supposed to be at 18 miles, so I ended up finishing the race. By about 20 miles the cramp had pretty much went away and I was able to run at a decent pace for the last 10k and finished up with a 2:21, which given the circumstances was a really great run. I didn't think I was going to finish for a long time, and as with my first London marathon, an amazing experience, an amazing weekend, just not the result for me. So another marathon, another lot of cramps, 3 for 3 at this point. Now that you know the full history of my marathon running, I'm going to move into the mistakes that I made, especially in the 2021 marathon, but also in the others, and things that have changed to improve by 19 minutes, and the things that I'm still working on to get better from here. The first mistake that I made in 2021 was only having one goal. Everything on that day was geared towards 2:15:12. I swear I started to see that time in my sleep. I never thought of anything else. I never considered starting a bit slower. I wanted to run 2:15:12. I knew what the splits were and that's the pace that I went at. Once things started to feel harder than I knew they should, I still held on to the pace because there was no other goal in my head. I wanted to run 2:15:12 and I wasn't going to do that if I got dropped at 8 miles. So make sure that you have multiple goals when going into a marathon. For my second marathon in Valencia, my A goal was to run 2:18. My B goal was to run faster than my dad's PB of 2:22, and my C goal was to not stop after stopping so many times in London 2 years before. My next mistake was not training in my race shoes. This was 2021, so carbon shoes were very much a new thing. A lot of people were still racing in non-carbons. I thought it would be a great idea to train in non-carbon shoes and race in carbon shoes because I would feel amazing. It didn't work. You have to train in your race shoes. You have to get your muscles used to the shoes you're going to race in. I think I did one session in carbons and was like, yeah, they're fine. And that could have been a big contributing factor to the cramp on that day. So train in the shoes you're going to race in. Another incredibly important thing that I didn't do for my first marathon is practice my fueling strategy. The recommendation for carb intake mid-race is somewhere around 90 grams per hour. So if you're not able to get close to that, you really have to practice. Try and push that number up. Maybe every hard long run you're trying to add an extra 5 grams an hour. Just building up as close as you can. Not everyone's going to get to 90 grams. Not everyone needs 90 grams, but that's a good sort of number to aim for, somewhere that you should try and be around. When you're running an elite marathon, you're able to get drinks on tables. This happens every 5k. Obviously for most people this isn't an option. I've only had elite drinks once and I won't be having them in this Valencia marathon. So what I do is I use one of these running belts. I carry a few gels in it and 3 soft flasks which I fill with Morton 320. I personally think carb drinks are the best way to go because they provide you with carbs and hydration at the same time. If you want to have a look at the running belt and soft flasks that I use and will continue to use, I'll leave a link to them in the description. So by far the biggest mistake that I made in 2021 was not training enough. I'll take you through what I think are the key numbers from each marathon block and hopefully this can paint a good picture picture for the difference between me running 237 and me running 218. But first, a few points to note. I used altitude in both the 2023 and 2024 blocks, and I did not in 2021. And exactly 10 weeks before Valencia, I fell while I was out running and broke my wrist, which I had to get an operation on. It's not that important to the story, but it explains why I raced Valencia in a splint, and I think these photos are pretty funny. Starting off with London 2021, I averaged 96.1 miles a week for the 12 weeks before a 3-week taper. The average pace of my easy runs was 6:45 pace, and my biggest session was 15 miles on the treadmill at 5:04s. Moving on to Valencia 2023, I averaged 113.2 miles per week for the 12 weeks before a 3-week taper. The average pace of my easy runs was 7:21s, and my longest session was 25 miles at 5:20s, which I did outside. Moving on to London 2024, I averaged 123.6 miles for the 12 weeks before a 3-week taper. The average pace of my easy runs was 7:26s, and my biggest session was 24.8 miles at 5:18s, which I did outside and managed to do twice at exactly the same pace. All of these blocks are on Strava in full if you want to go and have a look for yourself. I'll put a link to that in the description. But if my biggest mistake in the first block was not doing enough, my biggest mistake in the second block was doing too much, specifically being so set on doing 2 sessions and a long run per week. There was a few really bad sessions in there, and sometimes I should have just pulled back, given myself an extra easy day, but I never did that. And I would have just gotten more out myself if I'd pushed back a session a day or pulled back the intensity a little bit. But a lot of lessons learned for the third and final block. Looking at this block, you'll probably expect me to say that I did too much again, but I actually don't think that was the case. When I look back at the months leading into the marathon, it's pretty clear that I only went over 18 miles 3 times in the whole block, which I just don't think is enough, and it's something I'll look to improve on this time around. Speaking of things I'll look to improve, let's get into the changes that I plan to make for Valencia 2024. Well, I've recently moved to a new coach. I spent most of my adult life being coached by my parents, so this was a pretty big move for me. When I moved to be coached by my parents in 2018, this was meant to be a temporary move. So after 6 years, I just felt like I needed something fresh and new. I only made the switch about 2 months ago, and I've already started to see benefits. It's hard for me to say exactly what training will look like because this is such a recent coaching move, but based on the discussions that we've had already, I think that some major changes are going to be a reduction in easy mileage. In February and March I was hitting around 130 miles a week, but I think this will come down to 110, 115, which will allow me to prioritise more of those sessions that are over 30k in volume. There was even chats of going as far as 45k, so we'll see how that goes. Another thing that my new coach has suggested is carb loading. A lot of the experienced marathon runners may be surprised to hear that I've never really carb loaded. I eat pasta the night before the marathon, but I've never made a massive effort to carb load or count the number of carbs that I'm having, so this is definitely something that could make a big difference. The number that was mentioned to me was 10 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight in the 24 hours before the race, which is a lot of pasta. There's going to be some supplementing with carb drinks and gels in that 24 hours, but that's something I'm going to have to practice, build up to. I don't expect to be able to hit that 640 grams the first time I try it, but I think if this is going to be something that works, it's a number that I can push close to throughout this marathon block and throughout future ones. The final change, which I've already started to implement, is some new strength exercises. I made a whole video on my strength routine a few weeks ago, so I won't go too in depth on this, but basically I've done strength training for maybe the past 8 years. Don't see a strength coach, just sort of pick up exercises as I go, just because I haven't really thought about doing these exercises. I didn't have anyone to tell me to do them. So after London, I picked a few exercises that would target my calves, my hamstrings and my glutes, and added them into my gym routine. I honestly can't say if I felt any difference yet, but it's something that I'm willing to just do and put a lot of effort into, because if I don't and I get cramp in Valencia, I'm going to regret it. I'm going to leave it there. I plan to document the entire journey to the Valencia Marathon and beyond. It's 13 weeks at the time of posting, so hopefully I can provide a lot of value in that time. So subscribe if you want to follow along, and if there's anything in particular you want to see, please let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Cheers.